Clara Hastings arrived on Maple Lane with nothing but her dog, Toby, and a lifetime's worth of memories packed tightly in the back of a faded blue Subaru. Widowed for 5 years, Clara had sold her large house in the city and purchased the quaint little bungalow at the end of the cul-de-sac. It was a pale yellow home with green shutters and a porch swing that creaked softly in the breeze. From the outside, it seemed like the perfect place to start fresh. Maple Lane was picturesque. Cherry blossoms lined the street, their petals carpeting the sidewalks in shades of pink every spring. The lawns were manicured, mailboxes freshly painted, and nearly every house bore a cheerful flag or seasonal wreath. It looked like a page torn from a magazine. But as Clara would soon learn, looks could be deceiving. The first to greet her was Barbara Sinclair, president of the Homeowners Association. Barbara appeared on Clara's porch before the moving truck had even finished unloading. She wore a lemon-yellow sweater set and held a clipboard like a weapon. "Welcome to the neighborhood," she chirped. "We pride ourselves on a certain standard here." Clara smiled warmly. "I'm sure I'll do my best to fit in." Barbara's eyes swept over Clara's modest furniture and Toby, who was barking from the porch. "Pets must be under 30 pounds and leashed at all times." "We've had incidents." Clara nodded, making a mental note even though Toby, a golden retriever, weighed at least 70 pounds and had never hurt a soul. She decided not to argue. Over the next few days, Clara met more of her neighbors. There was Ed and Marlene, an older couple who lived directly across the street and spent most of their days on their porch judging passers-by. Then came the Crawfords, a loud, brash family with teenagers who threw parties on weekends and left beer cans in Clara's recycling bin. And finally, there was Jonah Fry, a reclusive man who rarely left his home and seemed to glare at Clara from behind his curtains. Despite the chilly reception, Clara went about settling in. She planted roses in her front garden, painted the mailbox a cheerful blue, and baked muffins for her neighbors. Only Ed and Marlene accepted, then later critiqued the flavor in earshot of her open window. Toby was another sore spot. Though friendly and well-behaved, his barking during walks or playful running in the yard earned Clara more than one passive-aggressive note on her doorstep. A week later, Clara received her first HOA violation notice. It cited non-conforming mailbox color and dog exceeding approved weight limit. Attached was a fine. Clara stared at the notice, feeling a simmering anger rise in her chest. This wasn't the warm welcome she'd imagined. But she took a deep breath and folded the letter carefully. She would not be bullied. Not by Barbara or anyone else. She had survived much worse. And she was about to teach Maple Lane that appearances could be deceiving. Spring faded into summer, and Clara's patience wore thinner with each passing week. It wasn't just the incessant complaints or the surprise inspections from the HOA, it was the quiet cruelty, the whisper campaigns, the icy smiles. Barbara, the ever-vigilant HOA queen, began showing up unannounced, measuring Clara's lawn with a ruler, inspecting flower beds, and photographing her compost bin. "Property values are everyone's responsibility," Barbara said one morning, smugly slipping another notice into Clara's mailbox. Ed and Marlene grew bolder in their commentary. "Some people don't understand the meaning of restraint," Ed grumbled one afternoon, watching Clara repaint her porch swing a soft robin's egg blue. "She probably thinks she's improving the place," Marlene added. The Crawfords weren't any better. Their teenage son had taken to tossing fast food wrappers into Clara's front yard. The father, Dave, revved his motorcycle past her house every morning at 6 a.m., waking both Clara and Toby. Clara's attempts to talk to them were met with mocking smiles. Even Toby wasn't safe. One evening, Clara returned from the grocery store to find a note pinned to her door. "Next time your mutt barks, we'll call animal control." It was signed anonymously, but Clara recognized Barbara's meticulous handwriting. She tried to stay positive. She joined the local gardening club and offered free herbs to passers-by. She volunteered at the library. But the neighborhood's hostility clung to her like smoke. The final straw came in the form of a neighborhood meeting. Held in the Sinclairs' oversized living room, the gathering reeked of lemon polish and fake hospitality. Clara sat quietly as Barbara rattled off a list of new rules. No outdoor furniture in non-neutral tones. No bird feeders unless approved by the board. All pets must be registered and photographed for HOA files. Someone coughed. Someone else muttered. Then Barbara smiled thinly at Clara. We believe in uniformity for the betterment of all. I trust our newest resident understands that. Clara returned her gaze calmly. I understand perfectly. That night, she stood on her porch, looking out over the pristine lawns and perfect houses, their foundations built on gossip and control. Toby nuzzled her hand. Time to do a little gardening of my own, she whispered. And so Clara began digging, not in her flower beds, but in her neighbors' lives. Clara knew better than to act in haste. Revenge, like roses, needed patience, sunlight, and the right timing to bloom. She began subtly, quietly observing the patterns of her neighbors' lives, what they hid, what they thought no one saw. She took early morning walks with Toby, who had been fitted with a bright orange service dog vest, not because he was one, but because it discouraged harassment. Clara had once volunteered at a shelter, the vest was real enough. As she strolled, she noticed how Dave Crawford often left early, sometimes returning midday in a different car. She noted Ed's habit of leaving his trash out a day early and slipping certain items into others' bins. She watched Barbara meet with a mysterious contractor late at night, far outside the HOA's noise and activity guidelines. Clara began keeping a journal. Nothing slanderous, just facts. Dates, times, behavior. She clipped every HOA notice she received, carefully cataloging them alongside photos she quietly snapped of other neighbors violating those same rules. The next step was information. Clara used public databases, social media, even the local library's archives. It turned out the HOA had been cited before for discriminatory practices, but the complaints had mysteriously gone away. She dug further and discovered Barbara's son ran the landscaping company that got all the neighborhood contracts, unbid, unreviewed, and overpriced. One evening, Clara sat in her living room, sipping chamomile tea and flipping through her thickening folder. The stack of printed screenshots, emails, and photos was becoming damning. The following week, she mailed a letter. Just one. Anonymously. It went to a local journalist known for investigative features on suburban corruption. Inside the envelope were photocopies of HOA minutes, Barbara's unfiled conflict of interest forms, and a breakdown of how dues were being spent. 2 weeks later, a headline appeared on the regional news site. The other side of Maple Lane, homeowners pay, one family profits. The neighborhood buzzed. Clara feigned surprise. Barbara called an emergency meeting. This time, it wasn't in her pristine living room but in the community clubhouse, which now brimmed with suspicion and side eyes. I want to assure everyone, Barbara began, her voice tight, that these accusations are baseless. The HOA has always operated with transparency. Clara raised her hand. Could you walk us through the vendor selection process? Barbara flinched. Others murmured. Jonah Fry, the recluse from 2 doors down, spoke up for the first time. Why are our dues going up, but the sidewalk repairs keep getting delayed? And just like that, the facade cracked. Clara didn't smile. She merely sat back and waited. There was more to come, and she hadn't even started on the Crawfords yet. The fallout from the article was swift and satisfying. Barbara temporarily stepped down, to clear her name, but not before her son's shady contracts were suspended pending review. The neighborhood simmered with gossip and unrest. Clara could feel the shift like the change in air before a storm. Something was coming. Now, with Barbara publicly discredited, Clara turned her focus to the Crawfords. It started with the loud parties. Clara had documented the noise violations, complete with audio recordings and time-stamped footage from her discreetly installed doorbell camera. The night Dave's son threw a rager while his parents were out of town, Clara reported it, along with copies of the footage, not just to the HOA, but to the county code enforcement office and local police. Warnings turned into citations. The Crawfords were fined heavily. Then came the deeper dig. Clara discovered that Dave, despite posing as a blue-collar worker, was running an illegal car repair business out of his garage. She tracked license plate numbers of various cars parked outside at odd hours and gathered photographic evidence of oil spills, tool racks, and exhaust modifications, all in violation of zoning regulations. With a neatly organized report, she tipped off the city. A week later, an inspection unit arrived unannounced. Clara watched from behind her curtains as Dave stood in his driveway shouting at the officials, who calmly issued citations and sealed off his workshop. The Crawfords' temper flared. Their teenage son smashed Clara's mailbox one evening. She had already replaced her doorbell cam with a more covert model aimed right at the driveway. The footage was shared with the police. The boy was charged with vandalism. The final stroke came when Clara sent another anonymous tip to the IRS. She didn't know whether Dave was properly reporting his side income, but given his other decisions, she had a strong hunch. And just like that, a quiet audit was launched. The Crawfords withdrew from public life. Their music stopped. Their wild teen disappeared into sullen silence. Clara's yard, once scattered with their debris, was now tidy. She hadn't raised her voice once. Hadn't threatened or slandered. She had simply observed, recorded, and let justice follow its course. The neighbors began to view Clara with a new wariness. Some nodded more respectfully. Jonah Fry even waved. Clara wasn't done. Not yet. There was still Ed and Marlene. Clara approached Ed and Marlene with a strategy unlike the others. She had long suspected that behind their bitterness was a desire to remain relevant, a fear of fading into irrelevance in a neighborhood that was slowly changing without them. So instead of exposing them, Clara invited them for tea. They arrived on a Sunday afternoon, dressed in their stiff church attire, curious and suspicious. Clara had prepared a tray of scones, finger sandwiches, and real china cups, her late mother's set. "You're trying to bribe us?" Ed muttered, only half joking. Clara chuckled. "I'm trying to be neighborly." The conversation began stiffly, filled with awkward pauses and passive remarks. But Clara steered it gently toward memories, childhoods, favorite meals, how different neighborhoods used to be. Marlene softened first. "I used to love baking, before my hands went stiff. You know, arthritis. I can give you my recipe for lemon lavender cookies," Clara offered. "They're easy on the hands." By the end of the afternoon, they were laughing. Clara learned Ed had been a history teacher and Marlene once sang in a local choir. It became a weekly tradition. And as their visits continued, the coldness in their behavior toward others began to melt. Ed stopped grumbling so loudly. Marlene started waving to other neighbors. One day, Marlene confessed, "We just wanted someone to talk to. Everyone's so busy or too proud." Clara nodded. Sometimes people just need an invitation. In changing them, Clara realized something had shifted in herself. Revenge didn't always have to be painful. Sometimes, the sweetest kind came from transformation, not destruction. She hadn't forgotten Barbara or the Crawfords. But she had found something deeper than retaliation. She had found a way to mend what had been broken, not just in the neighborhood, but in her own heart. Clara stood on her porch that evening, sipping tea, Toby by her side, and smiled. Maple Lane was starting to look like home. Clara's garden was blooming by the time the state investigation into the Maple Lane HOA was officially opened. A formal complaint, backed by documents, minutes, and contracts, had been accepted. While she had initially sent it anonymously, Clara had since found an ally in Jonah Fry, who had taken the case public. Jonah, a quiet, meticulous man with a past in auditing, had grown tired of the pettiness and waste. Together, he and Clara began attending city council meetings, speaking up not just for themselves but for other residents who had been silenced or bullied by Barbara's regime. Barbara's temporary leave turned into permanent resignation. Her house went up for sale 3 weeks later. No one threw her a going-away party. The HOA was restructured. New elections were held, this time fairly. Jonah became president. Clara declined any official title, preferring the quiet power of a neighbor who knew how to listen, and when to act. One Saturday morning, as the community gathered for a neighborhood cleanup, Clara's idea, Ed grilled hot dogs while Marlene handed out iced tea. The Crawfords, surprisingly, showed up too, quiet, contrite, their son helping stack bags of trash. Clara handed Dave a pair of gloves. "You've got good hands for fixing things," she said. "Maybe you could help repair the park benches?" He looked surprised, then nodded. "Yeah. I could do that." The street felt different now. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. People talked more. Helped more. Laughed more. And as Clara looked around at the transformed Maple Lane, she felt a kind of peace settle inside her. She hadn't just fought back, she had changed something. Not by force, but by persistence, kindness, and the quiet, deliberate art of sweet revenge.